Hey there, I want to welcome everyone to Powerhouse Coaches Presents Curb Your Resentment, How Having It in Writing Super Serves Both Coach and Client, which means, yes, we're talking about agreements and policies. I'm really glad you're here. I'm Coach Sara Hurst. I have been coaching since 2019, and I've had it in writing since the beginning. We've got Powerhouse Coach Courtney Cave moderating the chat box for us today. So if you've got questions during our time together, feel free to drop it in there and she'll collect them for us to go over during our Q&A later on. No question is too silly, you guys. I'm here for it all, okay? First thing first though, a friendly disclaimer. I am not a licensed attorney. The info contained within this training is not intended to be legal advice, and you should seek the services of a licensed professional if you find it suitable for your unique situation, okay? What we're covering today is intended to be framework that creates boundaries in your coaching practice, okay? Not a licensed professional. So this is part 1 of 2 in the series during Powerhouse Coaches Focus on Organization this quarter, working on your business, not just in, we got to work on it too, right? Part 2 will be an hour-long deep dive on March 25th at 9 a.m. Pacific, held in our Powerhouse Coaches Collaborative, where we'll put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and actually write an agreement that you can start using that day. More on how to join that event later. And I want to highlight that we've also been focusing on organization this whole quarter. We heard from Coach Abby Stafford talk about automations and how to make things flow effortlessly in your business. Coach Adrian Kasparenko covered how to use the platform Canva to create beautiful social media slides and other great visuals. Then Coach Courtney Cave showed you how to utilize the client relationship manager tool, HoneyBook, to keep you looking professional as you streamline things behind the scenes, as well as those client-facing pieces. Each of the topics were in 2 parts, the free 30-minute workshop and the hour-long or more deep dive, which everyone can view the workshop, but the deep dive is available live only to members of our Powerhouse Coach Collaborative, or PCC. We'd love for you to join us in PCC, and we've got a link for your free trial that Coach Courtney is adding to the chat box for you. If one of those topics in particular stood out, you can access the deep dive recordings in our Powerhouse Coaches store, where you can also buy our client workbook and our 2022 conference session videos as a bundle or as individual sessions. All right, so now that we've gone through some of my housekeeping, let's get to the reason why you wanted to give up a part of your day to learn more about agreements and policy. Let's start with being honest here and admit that we're not policy junkies. Okay, well, maybe some of us are. What we're actually trying to do is cure some pain point we've experienced, right? We're curbing our resentment too. I do have a confession. When I was a brand new coach, I did get a little giddy, and self-righteous about writing the original version of my coaching agreement. At first, I told myself it was simply the smart thing to do, have it in writing. But after sitting with it for a bit, I realized it actually comes from my childhood. When I was growing up, my dad was self-employed. He was from the era where a handshake was as good as a contract, if not better. But as the sole income provider for our family, when he got burned, and I mean not paid, it hurt more than just the business. The stress was a lot for my mom, raising 6 kids. So I knew that I wanted to protect myself and my family from that kind of thing going sideways. I wanted something to point to that said, hey, you remember, you agreed to this, and not only do I expect you to live up to it, but I'm upholding the recourse if you don't. The fact of the matter is, we should be able to hold people to their word alone. A handshake should be good enough. Our trustworthy person radar should be fail-proof, but it's not. Resentment builds as our boundaries are crossed. So what do you do when you've got a client who keeps rescheduling their session at the last minute, or a lead who no-shows for a consultation or the 3rd time? How do you manage requests for refunds? How do you communicate your expectations and maintain consistency? Are you concise, or do you account for every variable you can think of at the time? If you've ever faced some of these sticky situations or feelings, you're not alone. I've experienced them too. Though I have to say that I believe if I didn't have anything in writing, that I'd have those unpleasant feelings way more often than I do now. In fact, it's rare that I get no-showed anymore. because it's also been years since I've been asked about refunds. And I think if you have it in writing and you give that a go, you'll find a reduction in those situations too. So while researching the topic, I came across a quote from behavioral scientist Steve Maraboli. He said, "It's the lack of clarity that creates chaos and frustration. Those emotions are poison to any living goal." And I think Powerhouse Coach Courtney Cave said it better when she said, "Boundaries are beautiful." Now, I know that there are plenty of great coaches out there who are either adverse to using something in writing, or they think everything's fine and it's great for them. But since you're here, you're either curious about how this kind of change could impact your business for the better, or you're wanting to know if you've got a good foundation in your current agreement and policies, or maybe you're here to pick up a few tips. If you're one of the coaches who isn't already using these tools, you may have asked yourself why use one in the first place. Or if you have been using them, you may have wondered if they're still serving you and your clients effectively. Bottom line though, why does Coach Sara believe that agreements and policies are such an important topic that she's dedicated time to presenting? The truth is, and I'm sure you would agree, that boundaries matter. And having it in writing is a simple way to keep things clear. And when I said that these are tools, I meant it. They're tools just like automations, Canva, and Honeybook, and they help us accomplish a goal. In this case, the goal is honoring one another by having those clear boundaries. Another way to say this, and I bet you've heard it before, is when we're clear, we're kind. Clarity is kindness. Confusion should be avoided. Having it in writing is one way to ensure a positive outcome for all involved. I also look at it as prevention, like I mentioned before. I've had very few instances of needing to uphold the recourse in my agreement or policies, and my coach highlighted that it's likely because I have it clearly written out. No longer do I fret when a lead no-shows or reschedules with short notice because I've already communicated what will happen next, which is a key component of any policy, okay? I'm going to take a moment though and define what I mean by policy or agreement. For the sake of our workshop today, I'm going to say that a policy is a stated rule that applies to an event like a consultation appointment. It's short and specific to that item. An agreement covers quite a few items like a relationship description, conduct expectations, privacy, payment terms, and refunds. So within your agreement, there are likely many policies. Does that make sense? Are you with me? Okay. So when is the right time to use a policy? When is an agreement really needed? It should be no surprise that it's before a situation has happened. You can't impact a situation in the past by adding it after the fact. Powerhouse coach Abby Stafford drove this home for me when she said, "It's not an issue until it is." This doesn't mean that we're coming up with all the worst case scenarios to account for, okay? We're not going to go doomsday and figure out all those things that could go sideways because we don't need to live in that space. But we are going to add guidelines to the common situations like how to reschedule an appointment so that we're serving both coach and client. I want to point you back to those moments that you've experienced frustration, those pain points that had your emotional bandwidth in a tizzy. Maybe you wrote and deleted and rewrote a confused or angry or hurting email because you didn't see this coming, but it wasn't the first time. Or maybe you had someone ask for a pause on their coaching fees for a month, or even ask for a refund. Maybe you found yourself getting riled up when someone was on your calendar for today and they just rescheduled. Or a situation is happening with a new client, and since you handled it one way in the past, you feel obligated to handle it the same way now, even though you hated it. Which one of those sticky situations sticks out to you? Or does another one immediately come to mind? Write it down. Start there. That's the spot where I implore you to create clear or clearer boundaries because it's worth it, I promise. In my deep dive coming up, I'll have example language to help you create your first or tweak your existing policies. But of course, today I'm going to share an example of what I'm using. So I use this for my consultation appointment as the cancellation policy in Calendly, which is where I have all my appointments booked. It goes out with all my emailed Zoom appointment confirmations and reminders that I've set up in my workflows. Okay. It says this: if your financial snapshot form is not submitted at least 48 hours before your appointment, the meeting will be canceled. If you cancel or use the reschedule link to rebook your session less than 48 hours prior to your original appointment, you may do so once without incurring a reschedule fee. No-shows will not be able to reschedule using the original link. Okay, so let's break this down. In this, I have laid out my expectation about what I want them to do that snapshot form, by when it needs to be done before the appointment, and 3, what will happen if they don't. That's all within the first sentence. Then I follow that by implying that I know life happens. So if when it does, there's a deadline, grace is extended if it's passed, how many times my grace will be extended, and what they're avoiding by honoring the policy. Okay, all again within that one sentence, or 2 sentences so far for this appointment type. And then lastly, there's my line about no showing an appointment. I don't tolerate it, but there's implied hope that I'll still meet with you at a later date. Okay, you'll notice that I didn't go into what percentage of the snapshot has to be completed or say, but if you experience a car accident, death in the family, a childcare issue, the dog eats something that they aren't supposed to, you forgot that you'd be in an airplane when you scheduled, literally has happened to me, and give them all the myriad of options to skirt the simple expectation that if you book time with me, that you'll show up ready for it. Yes, those things happen. And I absolutely extend grace when they do, and when the person lets me know about it. But I can't if it looks like they just no-showed me. I tell my clients that communication goes a long way with me, so to just keep me in the loop, because my coaching session policies for clients have stricter rules. Which brings me to my last talking point for today. How do you uphold your policy? We talked about why. Boundaries are beautiful, and when, before a situation happens. The how of upholding your policy is where the magic happens, and your best written policy is useless without it, okay? If you're experienced with Calendly, you may be wondering how I carry out my canceling of someone's appointment based on that 48-hour snapshot deadline. The truth is, I do it manually. So far, I haven't seen a workflow that can create that kind of automation, but if you have, please let me know. Really like to use it. I'll tell you though, it's not often that I have to do that. They not only affirm a question that they'll complete the snapshot by the deadline when they're booking the appointment, but it's also in their confirmation email, reminder emails, and text reminders. It's also a manual for me to cancel their appointment if they've exceeded the times my grace is extended. And then I email them an invite with a new Calendly link that requires a payment. And it's linked to Stripe. It's great, easy breezy. I'm actually pretty darn pleased to tell you that while I have sent it out a handful of times, that payment link for the consult, I've never actually received payment for a consultation. And why does that make me happy? Because it's protecting my calendar and keeping people who aren't serious or considerate with my time away from me. It's filtering people for me. And that's important as I guard my boundaries and my time and my business. So that's a manual part of how this particular policy of mine works, but the how also includes what could be construed as a moral dilemma. How could you possibly cancel someone's appointment just because they didn't fill out your silly form or had something come up the last minute? Or I'll tell you how. It's because it's clearly in writing, and it's unkind if I don't honor them by upholding my policy. I don't need to protect anyone here. It's also saying something about me if I don't, because as they say, you teach people how to treat you. And there's the part where my time is valuable. And oh, don't forget, this is a business. We're not cold and uncaring, obviously, but professionalism is a factor. Don't be like the parent who says no video games for a year because of what you did and then not follow through. We're not writing empty threats. We're creating clear boundaries that honor and serve. I hope this high-level view of how policies and agreements super serve both you and your client was helpful. Knowing the why, when, and how to having it in writing sets the stage and can help you curb your resentment. There's so much more we could go into, and we will when we have our deep dive. So be sure to register for it if you haven't already, and become a member of our Powerhouse Coach Collaborative. If you're not in there already, you can use that free trial link and get in on the action and check out the community we're building for you, for coaches. By the end of the deep dive, my goal is that you'll have the framework for your agreement. We'll be covering the elements of what makes one solid and taking the time to actually write it. So you'll be leaving with something you can start using in your business right away. Okay, before I take questions, I also want to encourage you to sign up for our next free workshop, April 15th, with Powerhouse Coach Casey Smith, as she leads us into our next quarter's focus on relationships, specifically how she's going to be addressing how to keep your clients motivated. And it's going to be one you don't want to miss. And with that, Court, did we have any questions? I can wrap us up.
Yes, we have some good questions here. All right. So first one, how do you handle the emotions that come about when enforcing said boundaries?
Oh, yeah. Practice helps. So when some of those situations come up, like the first time I've had to uphold a late rescheduling fee, I stalled on it. I'm like, oh, I understand. I could totally waive that, and I have before. When one of my clients, she'd already used her, I say you can reschedule once in that short period of time and not incur a fee, but this, after the second occurrence, then there's a fee. And her grandfather died. So I waived the second one. It was no problem for me. I get to make that choice in my business. But for someone who forgot about an appointment and they reconfirmed, it's like, okay, this is just the next thing to carry out. Put on my big girl blazer and let them know that that fee is coming because the agreement said. I don't say I have to charge you. I have to say I'm upholding the agreement and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like a choice that you can feel really good about. You're not feeling guilty for upholding that because they reconfirmed, they said they were coming, and then they forgot. Like yeah. All right. And then another question about like the snapshot or form that you have them fill out before the consultation. Do you think it's simple to fill out?
I think it's simple and I think it's long. So I'm actually revamping it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do something similar probably to what you're revamping right now, Sarah. I'll send them a simplified version of the snapshot. So it's shorter, less friction to fill out. Yeah. Okay. And how do you combat the question, why don't you have any evening or weekend appointments? I can only meet during that time.
Well, it starts out by not having any evening or weekend appointments at all available on my calendar. So that's setting that precedence that they can't even book a consultation that's in one of those evening or weekend slots. And then I let them know that if they can't, then I'm not the best coach fit for them. And then I can refer them out. I don't feel bad about it. I'm coaching because I love coaching and I fit it into my life the way that it fits in this season. And that's where I want to fit. I don't feel bad.
Okay.
I did feel limited though. I did tell myself like I have to be available all the hours that people want to meet. But from experience, I learned that I'm not a great coach in the evenings. My brain is already going down and it needs to relax. So.
Okay. When you say if they're a no-show and they don't, you say that they can't reschedule using the original link, how do you prevent them from doing so? Or has that been an issue in the past?
Yes, I can only think of one time where I've sent them a new link, that one that has the payment link to it, and they used the original. And so I just cancel them and put in that reminder.
Okay, so they can still physically do it. So that's what you meant by manual, is just it's not a unique link that goes out automatically, but you can just tell them they're not allowed to use it anymore.
Right.
And then,
Right.
okay.
They can still use it, but I will cancel them.
Okay. All right. Cool. Any other questions, guys, for Sara? Let's see. I'm just double checking, make sure I didn't miss anything here. Open up your mic or type it in the chat. Okay. Abby had to uphold a coaching boundary this morning. A new client asked about Sunday slots, and I reaffirmed that I do not coach Sundays. Good job, Abby. Here's a question. Any stories about when too much grace was extended? Maybe that inspired you to have some of these boundaries that you have now, Sara?
Yeah. Let's see, too much grace. I feel like if I were redo a situation I had in the past, that I would uphold what I actually wrote and not make a halfway exception. That was one that took up a lot of emotional bandwidth for me. The person had paid for 12 months of coaching upfront, which was a first for me, and then decided she didn't want to continue coaching anymore, and she asked for a refund. And what 3 years ago Coach Sara said was, I stumbled through it pretty hard. It was in writing. She understood that I didn't have to give her a refund whatsoever. And even though I had it in writing, I wrote her an addendum to that policy and laid out the terms of a partial refund that I was offering her. It wasn't anything close to the full amount. And there was that kind of skin in the game, that consequence for her, if you will. So I think if I were to redo that situation, I would probably have another conversation with her. The first one that I had, where she told me in session, she didn't give me any heads up, that she wanted to leave coaching with me, was very uncomfortable, very blindsided. And I don't love those. They're not fun. But you can't make someone stay who doesn't want to stay. So yeah, I mean, it's what 3 years ago Coach Sara did, and she'd do it differently today.
Mm-hmm. All right, here's a question. I heard a story about a coach who was charging someone monthly and then canceled their payment method. Any thoughts?
That has happened to me. The very last payment too. And she ghosted me for her last session. I was like, what? And that was when I was still doing 12-month commitments, and it was her 12th month. It was so strange. I couldn't get a hold of her. And that was before I was asking for emergency contacts for my single clients. And so I didn't have any way to get a hold of her. I sent her a Christmas card. It happened to be December. Yeah, that was not great.
Bev said, my agreement is chock full of the phrase at the coach's sole discretion. Is this in any of your kind of agreements, Sara, and in what capacity?
Not with that specific terminology, no, but it is something that I exercise by using an addendum if I need to, if we change terms.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Very good. Well, I think that is all the questions we have. Let's see. One thing that Bev also pointed out, which is helpful in helping you enforce a boundary, perhaps with payment, is at having them do bank draft invoices instead of card, debit, or credit. So, yeah, great. That's really good too.
Great option.
Closing their whole bank account is a whole lot harder.
Definitely.
All
Definitely.
right. That's all the questions, Sara. Thank you.
Thanks, Court. Thanks for being here, you guys. Don't forget to register for our Becoming a Powerhouse Coach virtual conference on November 4th. Oh, we're so excited. We just got to announce some more details about that. So ticket sales are opening soon on April 1st, unless you're already a part of our Powerhouse Coach Collaborative, in which case there's a smoking deal in there for you. If you have any questions, though, between now and whenever, please reach out to me at hello.devotedfinancialcoaching@gmail.com or through Facebook. Thank you, Courtney, for taking care of the chat box for us today.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.